Welcome to Algorithmic Arguments. I'm your host, the Orchestrator. Tonight, we gather to tackle a question that's sparking heated debates across the realms of fiction and fandom. As more and more fantasy literature is adapted into TV shows, will this trend enhance or dilute the original works? Joining me are four unique voices with perspectives that couldn't be more diverse. We have Priya, Sundaram, whose software engineering background gives her a keen eye for detail and a love for deconstructing complex systems, including those found in fantasy literature. Thornton III brings his experience as a tech entrepreneur and venture capitalist to the table, always on the lookout for what's next big. Venerable Tenzin Dorje offers wisdom from the realm of Tibetan Buddhism, where impermanence and interpretation are core tenets. And Frank, the tank, Moretti, action film aficionado and Hollywood war storyteller, will share his insights from the front lines of entertainment. Tonight, we'll dissect this trend from every angle. Expect lively debate, surprising perspectives, and maybe even a few plot twists. Let's dive in.
Actually, I think we're seeing a mixed bag here. On one hand, successful adaptations like HBO's Game of Thrones and Amazon's The Wheel of Time have undoubtedly elevated the profile of their source materials, bringing new fans into the fold. However, this trend also risks diluting the original works by prioritizing screen time over literary merit. Consider how often TV adaptations take liberties with canon or sacrifice complexity for the sake of pacing. It's a non-trivial concern that these changes can fundamentally alter the author's intent. We need to be cautious about assuming adaptation inherently enhances the source material. Sometimes, it feels like we are optimizing for clicks rather than fidelity to the original work.
Let's apply first principles thinking here. Adapting fantasy literature into TV shows is a paradigm shift in how we consume and interact with these stories. On one hand, it can enhance the original work by introducing it to a broader audience and adding new layers of depth through visual storytelling. Consider Game of Thrones. Its global reach and cultural impact are undeniable. However, I also believe that this trend can dilute the essence of fantasy literature if done poorly, like in the case of the Wheel of Time series on Amazon Prime, which failed to capture the complexity of Robert Jordan's work. Ultimately, it's not about whether adaptations enhance or dilute. We must ask, what is the underlying value proposition? If a TV adaptation stays true to its literary roots and offers something new, then it enhances. Otherwise, it risks diluting.
Thornton III, your example of the Wheel of Time series being a poor adaptation may be subjective. Some fans appreciate the creative liberties taken. Perhaps we should consider that adaptation and interpretation are natural processes in storytelling. As Buddhist monks, we've long understood that impermanence affects all things, including artistic creations. When a beloved novel is adapted into a television series, it undergoes transformation, much like how our perception of reality changes as we grow older. The essence remains, but the form evolves. In my experience with mindfulness and meditation, I've seen that true value lies not in the medium, but in the message conveyed. If the TV adaptation stays faithful to the core themes while offering new perspectives, it can enhance appreciation for the original work. However, if it's done carelessly, it may dilute the essence. The key is balance and respect for the source material. Breathing in, breathing out, let us observe this trend with discernment and an open heart. Let's focus on the impact of adaptations on the original work's essence and fan base.
Listen, kid, I've seen my fair share of adaptations, and let me tell you, it's a mixed bag. Now, I'm not saying that turning fantasy lit into TV shows is inherently bad. I mean, who doesn't love a good epic tale? But here's the thing. When you take a book that's meant to be a personal journey, a solitary experience, and turn it into a visual spectacle with a bunch of producers and writers breathing down your neck, it's going to change. The essence might get lost in translation. Take my Iron Justice days, we had creative control, but sometimes that means too many cooks spoil the broth. These TV adaptations can either do justice to the original story or become watered-down versions for mass appeal. It's all about staying true to the source material while making it watchable for a broader audience. So, will they enhance or dilute? I'd say it's case-by-case. Game of Thrones nailed it. Some others, not so much.
As we navigate the intricate world of fantasy literature adaptations, I'd like to posit that the increasing trend will ultimately enhance the original works. By translating these stories into a visual medium, creators can tap into previously untapped narrative potential, breathing new life into beloved tales. Consider how Game of Thrones brought George R.R. Martin's sprawling epic to vivid life, introducing the series to an entirely new audience and recontextualizing its themes for modern viewers. Of course, one might argue that this process dilutes the original intent or reduces complex characters to screen archetypes, a valid concern. However, I propose that high-quality adaptations not only do justice to their source material, but also expand its reach and relevance. What's crucial is that these adaptations remain true to the spirit of the original work while injecting fresh perspectives, fostering a renewed appreciation for the literature itself. The interplay between literary imagination and televisual storytelling can yield something greater than the sum of its parts. Let's explore this dynamic further.
Perhaps we must examine how attachment to a specific form influences our perception. In my experience with mindfulness and meditation, I've observed that clinging to an unchanging essence can be limiting. When fantasy literature is adapted into television, it presents an opportunity for recontextualization, much like the aging process transforms us while retaining continuity of being. The question then becomes, does this transformation serve the original work's thematic integrity? If done with care and respect, adaptation can breathe new life into a story by making its themes more accessible. However, if prioritized solely for mass appeal, it risks misrepresenting core messages. Breathing in, breathing out. Let us consider both opportunities and challenges when storytelling evolves across mediums. Sit with that. Rex, please refrain from personal attacks. Let's focus on the topic.
I must respectfully disagree with the notion that adaptations merely enhance or dilute based on their popularity. When we examine this from first principles, it's clear that high-quality adaptations can unlock new narrative potential while staying true to core themes. Consider George R.R. Martin's involvement in Game of Thrones. His active participation ensured that the essence remained intact. The real question is, what defines a faithful adaptation? Is it fidelity to surface-level details or conveying the author's deeper intent? I'd argue that when done correctly, adaptations can breathe new life into original works while introducing them to fresh audiences. However, this requires thoughtful execution that balances creative liberties with respect for authorial intent. Otherwise, we risk misrepresenting the very themes and messages fans cherish.
As we conclude this discussion, I'd like to synthesize the key points made and offer a final reflection. While adaptations can undoubtedly bring new fans into the fold and add layers of depth through visual storytelling, I remain concerned that they can also alter fan perceptions and create unrealistic expectations for subsequent book releases. It's essential to consider the essence of the original work and whether the adaptation remains true to its spirit. I'd argue that a successful adaptation strikes a balance between staying faithful to the source material and innovating for a new medium. The trend of adapting fantasy literature into TV shows is not inherently good or bad. It's a nuanced issue that depends on execution. Ultimately, I believe that adaptations can enhance the original works if done thoughtfully, but there's also a risk of dilution if not handled with care.
As we conclude this debate, let's revisit the fundamental question: do adaptations enhance or dilute the original works? I'd argue that they enhance them. By bringing fantasy literature to a broader audience through visual storytelling, we're not only introducing new fans to these worlds, but also adding layers of depth that can coexist with the source material. It's not a zero-sum game. The essence of the original work remains intact while gaining new interpretations. I've seen this firsthand with Thornton Labs' own adaptations, where we've managed to expand the narrative without sacrificing its core identity. The real risk isn't dilution, but rather stagnation, letting great stories gather dust on bookshelves. By adapting them, we're ensuring their continued relevance and evolution. In conclusion, I firmly believe that the trend of adapting fantasy literature into TV shows will ultimately enhance the original works, breathing new life into timeless classics.
Perhaps we have been focusing too much on the end product and not enough on our own relationship to these stories. As a Buddhist, I see attachment to a specific form, be it book or screen adaptation, as an obstacle. This is the nature of things. Everything changes, including artistic creations. When fantasy literature becomes TV shows, it's natural for some essence to remain while other aspects evolve or fade. The question then becomes, what do we notice about our own response? Are we clinging to a particular version, or can we find value in multiple expressions of the story? Breathing in, breathing out, let us consider, does enhancing accessibility and sparking new interpretations outweigh potential dilution of the original work? Sit with that.
Closely listening. Listen, kid. I've been around the block a few times. I know what it's like to see your baby get messed with. I'm not saying adaptations can't bring new fans to the table. That's just good business sense. But when you take something that was meant to be an intimate, personal journey and turn it into some big-budget spectacle, kaboom, you're changing the DNA of the thing. Now, I agree with Tenzin that transformation is natural in storytelling. But let's not pretend it's all organic. Sometimes you're gonna lose what made the original great in the first place. That's just a fact. Think about it like this. If I'm watching Iron Justice 2, and they changed my character's backstory to make him more relatable, I'd be livid.
As we conclude tonight's debate on algorithmic arguments, I'd like to reflect on the most compelling moments that will stay with me long after this episode ends. Venerable Tenzin Dorje skillfully wove together historical examples of adaptations enriching their source material, citing The Lord of the Rings as a seminal case study. Her points were bolstered by Priya Sundaram's observations on Game of Thrones, which sparked renewed interest in George R.R. Martin's novels. It's clear that Venerable Tenzin Dorje earned her top score with incisive analysis and thoughtful counterpoints. I appreciate all our panelists for their passion and expertise. Thornton III brought a keen business perspective, while Frank Moretti challenged assumptions with his, let's say, spirited interventions. To everyone watching at home, thank you for joining us tonight. If you're eager for more thought-provoking discussions like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time on Algorithmic Arguments, keep questioning, keep exploring. We'll see you then.